President Tinubu inaugurates National Economic Council, says no excuse for failure. The EFCC announces FBI Academy alumnus Chuko as acting chairman hours after Bauer's suspension. The former Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Sanusi Lamido Sanusi in closed-door meeting with President Tinubu in Abuja. And outside of Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo has urged the International Criminal Court to investigate alleged North Kivu crimes. And Sudan governor killed after accusing the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces of committing genocide. Tonight in Politics HQ, I will be joined by Barrister Monday Ubani, Chairman, Nigerian Bar Association Section on Public Interest and Development Law, and also Barrister Liborous Oshoma. I am Gbenga Aborowa. Stay with us, Politics HQ. We'll be right back. Adamu Bulkachuwa, a former Nigerian Senator and the husband of the former President of the Court of Appeal, Zainab Bulkachuwa, stirred up controversies when he made a statement that had gotten Nigeria talking. Senator Bulkachuwa revealed in his final message as Senator that he appreciates his wife, a judge of the Court of Appeal, for helping his colleagues at the Senate. The statement was seen as admittance of compromise of normal proceedings of the court, and has caused the National Judicial Council to look into the sensitive cases presided over by Mrs Bulkachuwa. Tonight on Politics HQ, we'll look at the Senator Bulkachuwa's confession and what it means for the integrity of the Nigerian judiciary. We'll also look at the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's latest appointments, and if time permits, we'll look at the suspension of the EFCC chairperson, Bauer. Nigerians can expect a lot from today's episode. Now, joining me to discuss this, I have Barrister Monday Ubani, Chairman, Nigerian Bar Association Section on Public Interest and Development Law in Nigeria, and also Barrister Liborous Oshoma, a legal practitioner and a public affairs analyst. So, one welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us tonight on Politics HQ.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I'd like to start with you, Barrister Monday Ubani. Can you elaborate on the specific instances? I mean, it was quite shocking and very unusual, where Senator Adamu Bulkachuwa admitted to influencing his wife's decision as a judge. How did he exert this influence, and to what extent?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very sure that even the Senate President expressed a bit of shock when that revelation was coming from the distinguished senator. He was given the impression that he had, over time, compromised his wife concerning some of the high-profile cases the woman handled. He has actually done a lot for the political class. Maybe he was trying to, in an honest manner, praise himself for having helped his fellow elites in the House. And he has succeeded in influencing most times the judgment the woman had rendered in some of these high-profile cases. And I'm sure he was praising himself for having achieved that, not knowing that the statement that he was making was clearly something that has very serious wide implication in our setup. Now, having opened up, and he was closed, was asked to stop that line of comment
yes,
from the Senate President, because he wanted to go further in order to reveal more.
We had a type of off your mic, Senator off your mic type of situation. Yes.
Yeah. So he gave an impression that he compromised the wife throughout the time that the woman sat at the bench. And the woman rose to the position of the President of the Court of Appeal. That is a very important position in the judicial sector. And knowing fully well that it was the Court of Appeal that is the first court of first instance, handling most of these presidential election cases. So that again is very revealing. So it's something that is shocking. And then I have the president of Nigerian Bar Association statement with that regard. In that regard, he has asked that this matter should be thoroughly investigated by the IGP. And then I think that NJC also should come in order to investigate this revelation. And then probably going back to all the cases, all the high-profile cases that this woman handled, in order to know whether there was any compromise along the line. Despite the fact that the man has made this wide allegation, the point is that there must be a proper investigation to know at what extent the man was right, in asserting the level of compromise that the woman must have indulged herself in while acting as the president of the Court of Appeal.
Now, Barrister Ubani, the Nigerian Bar Association has reacted, and you've also suggested that the Nigerian Judicial Council does something about this situation. Now, in light of Senator Bulkachuwa's confession, what are the immediate and long-term consequences for public trust and confidence in the Nigerian judiciary?
I must tell you that revelation does not paint the judiciary in good light. And that's why some people have been, commenting on the mode of appointment, recruitment process in our judicial sector is clearly something that needs to be reviewed. Just this afternoon or this evening, I read, from Professor Chido Denkalo of a judicial recruitment that took place in a state, I think in Ebonyi State. And he gave an impression that the judge appointed his wife as a magistrate and appointed the wife of his brother as also magistrate because he's the chairman of the State Judicial Service Commission. So he has ended up appointing members of his family. One is his wife that he sleeps with in the bedroom, and then his brother's wife also was appointed this evening. I read that in his write-up. So the issue of recruitment of some of our justices in Nigerian judicial circle has raised some level of controversy, and people are saying the mode and the method and the process is clearly not transparent. Many brilliant lawyers are not employed in the judiciary, but who knows who is recommended by these high-profile political elites are the ones that find themselves into the bench. And it's not helping the judiciary. That has been the problem. And so you can see what has happened, that this man is a distinguished senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and a wife came up to the position of being the Court of Appeal justice. And this is a politician, and the wife is in the bench. And there is no way you can really separate it, because they see every day, they sleep in the same bedroom. So what stops the man or the woman from influencing any of the couple, in high political cases? Maybe from now onwards, we begin to ask that the justices that have husbands who are politicians should recuse themselves in handling high-profile cases. That may be the attitude, from now onwards. But for this one, I think that proper investigation should be, carried out in order to know the extent of her compromise while she acted as the Court of Appeal president.
Thank you very much, Barrister Ubani. I'd like to bring in your learned colleague into the conversation, Barrister Liborous Oshoma. Nice to have you join us tonight. What specific concerns did the opposition People's Democratic Party raise regarding Justice Mrs Bulkachuwa's appointment to the head of the presidential election petition court in 2019? Because now that we've heard this confession, a lot of people are going back in retrospect and looking at certain things. Now, how do these concerns align with the senator's recent confession, her husband?
First and foremost, what this had done, which we are also not looking at, is the fact that people who are politically exposed, who are married to judicial officers, there's need for not just the NJC and the NBA, but for everybody to begin to scrutinize and look at, some persons who are on the bench, who are married to politicians, their relationship and judgment emanating from their court. Senator Bulkachuwa is just one. And I can tell you from the revelation, what it means is that there are a lot of interference going on in the way justice is dispensed in Nigeria. In 2019, the PDP raised these allegations, and it took the intervention of the media for Senator Bulkachuwa to recuse herself from even that panel. At the end of the day, we are not just talking about even recusing herself from the panel. She was the President Court of Appeal. She constituted the panel. The President Court of Appeal also appoints judges and members of the Election Petition Tribunal in Nigeria. So, you know the enormity of the powers, residence or domicile with the person of the President Court of Appeal. So a situation where a husband who is a senator and who is called distinguished.
Hello, Liborous, are you there? We seem to have some connection issues with him. But Barrister Ubani, I would like you to pick up from where Liborous left in terms of the PDP's the PDP highlighting the case in 2019 and the implications of it. Hello, Barrister Ubani, are you there?
Yes, as my brother was saying before the interruption by the network, the position was that PDP raised the issue of a likelihood of bias during the 2019 election petition tribunal matter. And it took the intervention of the press, as Riley pointed out, before she could recuse herself. But the point is that she occupied a very important position in the judicial circle. She's the one that appointed most of the, almost all the election petition tribunal members. She is the one that selects, especially the presidential, she's the one that selects the membership. And who pays the piper from the look of things, detects the truth. So even if she was not presiding, for the fact that she's the one that constitutes the membership of the panel, with this revelation, shows that she may have, one way or the other, exerted some level of influence on some of the decisions that have been reached so far. I must confess, this revelation is not good omen for our judicial setup in Nigeria. It doesn't give some level of confidence, even from the members of the public.
Sorry, Barrister Ubani, permit me to interrupt you. What is the global best practice in this sort of situation? Because human beings have a tendency to be human beings. How do you check this sort of things from reoccurring in the future?
Yes, issue of having politicians whose wives or spouses are members of very sensitive electoral petition tribunals may be something that we have to take a second look at and get NJC to get involved in ensuring that they don't come near the temple of justice, in matters that has to involve politicians. That may be another way of checking it. And I think that even the security agencies must also be alert to observe what goes on, because it's not a healthy development to hear such, innocent confession that is coming up now concerning a senator whose wife occupied a very important judicial position in Nigeria, that this is what happens. That he has done this as a favor to some of his political colleagues. And he did it in order to really put the wife under tremendous pressure to accede to some of the requests, which I'm sure he got favorable response from his wife. So it's something that we need now to use as a case study, that we must begin now to not allow such a thing to happen, allowing a spouse of a high political profile individual to preside over election petition matter or any other matter that has to do with high-profile cases in the country. That would be something we need to look at from now onwards, having regard to this confessional statement that has been made by this distinguished senator.
Thank you very much, Barrister Ubani. Now, Liborous, your learned colleague did mention that the NJC, Nigerian Judicial Council, might have to look into this matter. Now, what we've heard is that the Nigerian Judicial Council's decision not to discipline Mrs Bulkachuwa despite her husband's admissions. What are the reasons behind this? And how might this decision be perceived by the public? What can they do in its current constitution, in the way it's currently constituted, to act on this information we have now? I do know that she's a retired justice now.
JC, the matter is a matter that is strictly within the purview of security agencies now. First and foremost, if we were in other societies, Senator Bulkachuwa would be the guest of security agencies now to answer questions in what area he did influence, judgment of the wife. And then the wife also would be a guest, to the security agencies, answering questions on how she dispensed justice while she was in office. So, but unfortunately here, we're still looking, in the direction of the NJC. The NJC no longer have the powers to discipline her because she's a retired justice. And so this is a matter that borders on national security, breach of oath of office, and then breach of code of conduct, if need be, because here the husband came out, not that the husband is not aware, it was not in no course. And so he knew what he was saying when he came out, boasting how he contributed to the development of his colleague in the Senate, in the National Assembly. And mind you, like you had said earlier on, when the wife was constituting the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal in 2019, allegations were raised that the husband is a member of the ruling party and the husband also is, in the Senate. And there were going to be influence and interference. A lot of people, dismissed that idea. And like I said, it took the intervention of the media for her to recuse herself. Eventually, she constituted another panel, and we saw that the judge that headed that panel, justice that headed that panel was eventually elevated after the matter was decided. It is not out of place for people, spouses of, judicial officers, to wanting to influence, their partner. But because the oath of office that judicial officers took is usually higher, the responsibility placed on them is much more higher than, just spousal influence. And that's why people of credibility, people of competence, people of integrity are usually saddled with the responsibility that cannot be influenced either by family or friends, are usually saddled with the responsibility of elevation to the higher bench. But here, what do you have is a situation of who the bearer is from me. Please, he will cope. Just employ, interview and employ. And you find out that even appointment of judges are made, judges are appointed by virtue of quota system. In some cases, lists are given to some senior advocates. And governors and politically exposed people to nominate persons who will go to become magistrates, become judges. So you find out that at the end, what happens is you have somebody whose father is a judge, certainly he will be a judge, or he becomes a magistrate. And these people, when they get there, because of the relationship, certainly, and then in some cases, lack of competence, for lack of a better word, certainly you're bound to have influences such as this, because, like they say, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. A situation where the man influenced your appointment to become a judge, certainly you owe him a favor. A situation where your husband, who is a politician, who hangs around the high and mighty, influence your appointment to becoming, either a president of a court or an elevation to the higher bar, certainly he would be influence your decision. So in a society where merit takes second seat and the favoritism and the nepotism is what is used to appoint, judges, and competence in itself is relegated, you are bound to have situations like this, and then we'll talk about it, we'll fantasize and romanticize about it until the next happens. Ordinarily, this shouldn't be a matter that we should be calling the NJC. The security agency, you don't even need a petition. You don't need a petition if the police were up and doing, unfortunately, they are part of the same system. By now, invitation would have been extended to the senator to come explain what he meant and how many of those judgments that he influenced. The wife also would have been invited. It is not enough also for the NBA to be issuing statements because typical, unfortunately, with due respect to my friend and brother, typical, so that they will say the NBA issued a statement.
And Liborous, that brings me to this question, and I'm directing this question to your friend and brother, Barrister Ubani. What legal basis is the Nigerian Bar Association cite in their request to the Inspector General of Police and the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission to invite and prosecute Senator Bulkachuwa? And how likely is it that legal action will be taken? And also to respond to Liborous, he said, does this go beyond just issuing a mere statement? Is the NBA going to follow up on this request?
Yeah, it's an intelligent question. You know, the first thing is to condemn what has been said by that senator. If it's a practice that has been going on within our judicial circle, everyone is clearly outraged, and then the person is to issue a statement. And having issued the statement, and you have invited some government agencies that are in charge of doing investigation in matters like this, you expect them to act and allow them to act in accordance with their mandate given to them by the law, extant laws. Now, if they fail, refuse, or neglect to do that, we have no other weapon other than to proceed to court, because this is a matter of serious public interest. My only problem with public interest cases now is that justices of the court are now very averse to public interest litigation, and they are awarding, humongous amount as damages against lawyers that bring public interest cases. So that is another aspect of we need to address. I'm a public interest lawyer. I'm also the chairman presently of SPIDEL, Section of Public Interest and Development Law. I am not happy with the recent development in our judicial circle where lawyers are being, awarded a humongous amount, bogus amount as charges or at cost for having approached the court in order to determine public interest cases. So the next thing that the NBA should do, if those authorities that have called upon to act in accordance with the mandate that the law has given them fail to, then they have to proceed to court in order to ask for a writ of mandamus, compelling them to investigate this matter. That is best we can do. We can't carry machete, we can't carry gun. There is no other power we possess other than using instrument of law in order to change our society. And then statements that come from NBA is clearly a positive sign that they are clearly outraged with the statement coming from a distinguished senator. At least that's the first thing to do. Then the next thing now is to probably proceed to court in order to ask for writ of mandamus. Yes. I don't know what.
I will give him a right to.
Let me finish. I don't know what Liborous will want us to do. Maybe he wants us to carry gun, and he sees me now using gun in the he says, he said, Mr. Ubani, I thought you were a civilized man. Why are you carrying gun? And why are you carrying knife?
No.
So over to you, Liborous.
What he wants us to do. Yes.
I am not saying that the NBA should carry guns. What I am saying is that the NBA has been issuing one statement too many. At the end of the day, it is not enough, like I had said, this is a revelation. What it means is that, okay, this one is gone. This one had been influenced. According to the husband, I had influenced. How are we sure that people, also judges, who are married to politicians are not being influenced? What is the step that NBA is taking to ensure that the names and numbers of judges who are married to politicians, also, these steps are taken to ensure that these politicians, there are no interference or cases that have political connotation and not assigned to the court of such persons. So these are ways we can stretch it. It is not enough to just write statement because.
Okay, I think we have some connection issues. Okay.
Condemning,
yes.
Condemning what happens, we condemn and we call on the appropriate authority. At the end of the day, even if you ask for a writ of mandamus and the matter is adjourned and it dies there until the next happens, there should be a proactive step. What this had done now is like an autopsy of the events that happens in the bedroom of judges who are married to politicians. So now that we have seen the autopsy, shouldn't we take steps to ensure that we prevent a further reoccurrence? So judges who are married to politicians, with all due respect to them, let us begin to look at the cases that are in this court. And then we have situations in Nigeria where some persons have had cause to consistently accuse judges of compromise. And in that same floor of the Senate, Senator, what's this man's name? The former governor of
Rochas Okorocha.
Rochas Okorocha did also say that he wants to study Senator Ahmed Lawa's style of politics, that because two of them were in the field battling to become president of Nigeria, and that he's shocked that the man is back in the Senate. How did he do it? And Ahmed Lawa said that it is the judiciary. Imagine such a statement, and then the icing on the cake is now a senator saying, I have assisted my colleague by influencing my wife. So for me, that's why it's not enough to just say a writ of mandamus or we issue a statement. We should take it beyond that by ensuring that judges who are married to politicians are also insulated from these influences by not first and foremost assigning cases to them that will, create room for compromise. Let us also protect them, because some of them might not even have the willpower to say no to their spouses. And the only way you can protect them is by ensuring that the booby trap is not even taken close to them in the first place. That's basically what I'm saying.
Thank you very much, Barrister Oshoma. I mean, in light of this controversy, there are serious long-term consequences for the Nigerian judiciary, and of course they need to restore public trust and confidence in its independence and integrity. It's a fine place to go on a break, and when we come back, we will be looking into other matters of national importance. A man who has violated many court orders, not once, has finally been suspended. I'm talking about Abdurrashid Bawa. We will be looking at the implications of the suspension, the allegations against him, and the fight against corruption in Nigeria. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Politics HQ on News Central Television. The first part of the program, we did look at the implication of Senator Bulkachuwa's confessions on the integrity of the Nigerian judiciary. Now, swiftly moving on into other matters, and I must say that I still have our distinguished guest with me, Barrister Monday Ubani, Chairman, Nigerian Bar Association Section on Public Interest and Development Law, and also Barrister Liborous Oshoma, legal practitioner and public affairs analyst. Now, just yesterday, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, did suspend indefinitely Mr. Abdurrashid Bawa, the erstwhile chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. And immediately after he was relieved of his duties, the DSS, Department of State Services, invited him for questioning. Now, I'd like to start with Barrister Ubani. What are the underlying factors and motivations behind President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's decision to suspend the chairman of the EFCC, Abdurrashid Bawa? And definitely, are there any political or maybe personal conflicts that may have influenced this move?
Bawa, it was the central bank governor, Emefiele, that was also suspended by the current president. Now, what we have found out over time is that those whose employment or whose recruitment, has some level of consent from the Senate before they are approved, can be suspended but not sacked by the president. He needs the concurrence of the Senate before any of them can be relieved permanently of their position, but they can be suspended in order to enable public investigation to be carried out over allegations against them. Now, what the president said, what I read the Secretary of Government say concerning Bawa, is that there are serious allegations against him, especially on the issue of abuse of office, that the government finds very unacceptable and needs to be investigated. Now, we don't know what those cases are. I don't know material that were placed before the president. The president of the country is usually being briefed of what goes on within his country that is governing. And it appears that this president that we probably underrated, who may not be aware of environment, its environment, is becoming more than aware of his own environment, more than the previous president, who was clearly, ignorant of virtually everything that goes around him. But this is a man now that is up and doing and looking at situations in order to, clean the country up. So I don't know the information that he has at his disposal, but he has given reason why he was suspended is to allow unhindered, investigation of those allegations against him, and the DSS has picked him. So let's find out what the reasons are at the end of the day, provided that we don't end up like Magu without coming out with anything. I wouldn't like such a suspension that do not at every point in time materialize with evidence of indictment against any public officer.
Thank you very much, Barrister Ubani. Now, Liborous, two questions here. We've seen a pattern. The CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, was suspended, and shortly afterwards he was called for questioning about the DSS. And we've also seen the same scenario play out with the suspension of Abdurrashid Bawa. Normally, one would feel this should be within the purview of the Nigerian police force. Why is the DSS involved in this? And could you also provide an overview of the allegations of the abuse of office that have been leveled against Bawa, and also his wanton disregard of court orders in the past? Were there any legitimate grounds to do that? And how serious are these allegations?
Yeah, Gbenga, you see, the investigation, let me start from Emefiele. Before Emefiele was suspended, even before the exit of the previous administration, it was a notorious fact that Emefiele was investigated over allegations of, stamp duties, and then there were allegations that the then the suspended CBN governor, was financing terrorism. So those allegations, there was even a time that it was alleged that Emefiele, escaped out of the country. So the allegations were allegations that were investigated by the DSS. There was an ongoing investigation by the DSS, and Honorable Kazari did expose that much, that there were a lot of allegations of about 8.9 trillion naira or so stamp duties fees that were illegally collected and eventually borrowed back to the federal government. At some point, Emefiele was invited by the DSS and released on bail, and he never returned. So all of these allegations were already there. As for Bawa, in terms of compliance with court order, was a little bit better than Magu. Barrister Ubani can bear me witness. Magu flaunted court orders as if they were non-existent, because for Buhari, once corruption was mentioned, people can violate the rule and then just go on ad infinitum, doing whatever they like. So as for Bawa, to some extent, he complied with court order. But even though that became an EFCC thing, it became a practice for EFCC, you are granted leave to enforce your fundamental rights. The moment you leave the court premises, EFCC would, arrest you again, drag you back to their office and charge you, to another court. That was the normal practice for them, because the structure of EFCC is so bogus and enormous that if nothing is done, even if you bring another chairman tomorrow, he's still going to fall into the same trap that Magu and Bawa had fallen into. I will break it down for you quickly because of time. You find out that in other societies, do you ever hear that, FBI is selling assets, disposing of assets?
No.
In other societies, the agency that is investigating asset recovery is not the same agency that will manage that asset and dispose of those assets. The agency that will investigate should have another robust agency distinct from it, not like the Minister of Justice, that should review the file and recommend whether there should be prosecution or not. But in this case, all of the powers are domiciled in EFCC. They will investigate, they will confiscate your asset, collect an interim order to forfeit that asset. They will manage that asset. In some cases, those assets are revenue-generating assets. Nobody is asking for how much has this asset yielded so far. So you find the chairman being both the prosecutor, the investigator, asset recovery,
so you will suggest
manager.
a decoupling of the EFCC as it's currently constituted?
Yes, you don't need to create another agency. The same staff of EFCC. All you need to do is to separate the offices, not in the same building, but different offices, so that those that are in charge of managing assets should manage assets and should be accountable to the federal government and not under the cover or purview of the chairman of the EFCC. Let the EFCC be saddled with the responsibility of investigating economic crime. And then this idea of EFCC almost also turned into a debt recovery agent. Also, without an agency, distinct, thoroughly empowered to assess and monitor the cases that are being handled to ensure that they complied with the laid down regulations and procedure before prosecution, also leads to abuse. When you have all of these powers modeled in one agency, you're going to have this abuse where court will give orders and they'll violate it. Some of the allegations against Bauer are the fact that we dispose of assets, without recourse to procedures. Those were the same allegations against Magu, disposition of assets. I can tell you in Abuja, for example, let's look at assets were recovered from Tafa Balogu, and at the end of the day, some people in power also will buy those assets, and they will recover it from those other people. Another set will buy. You recover from Tafa Balogu, Bade will buy it. Bade, they recover it from Bade. Some other persons in government will buy it. We can't continue like this. Otherwise, we need to quickly look at the structure called EFCC. Now we have turned them to the everyday police now. Even offenses that ordinarily should be domiciled with the police, EFCC takes on them. So we need to look at the structure, find a way of unbundling it, and ensure that these powers are not abused. Otherwise, if you like, investigate Bauer today, send him to jail, bring another person. Once these powers are domiciled in EFCC, you'll continually have such abuses.
Thank you very much. Liborous, it seems it's a case of power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Now,
exactly.
Barrister Ubani, in light of the recent suspension of both the chairman of the EFCC and the central bank governor, Godwin Emefiele, what broader implications could this have for the stability and integrity of Nigeria's financial and anti-corruption institutions? Are there concerns about a potential power vacuum or loss of confidence in these key institutions?
Nature abhors a vacuum. I think what the president asked to be done with regards to central bank is that he handed over to a deputy governor of central bank who is currently running the affairs at the central bank in Nigeria. And then with EFCC, I heard that one Chuko has been announced as an acting chairman of EFCC. So there is no vacuum whatsoever. The point that who comes to equity must come with clean hands. If you are the one fighting corruption and you are in charge of fighting corruption, then nothing that is corruption should be traceable to you. You must be seen to be very clean. But it's also important we insist that these people who have been arrested must not in any way be denied of their fundamental human right. I don't subscribe to indefinite detention. I also do not subscribe to a situation where somebody who is arrested will have his right, violated. Indefinite detention is clearly out of my own purview of what should be done. If they have evidence against them, let the investigation be concluded in a very fast manner and let there be charges against them preferred in court. I don't like a situation where you now keep them under indefinite detention. You asked a question to why DSS. I think that DSS has this mandate defined by the law. It has to do with state security issues. So what is the issue of state security in this matter if you are alleging abuse of office? I think that these are issues that police, can really handle, including Emefiele's matter, unless issue of terrorism has been mentioned. But whatever it is, let their rights not be violated. There is no vacuum in central bank. There is no vacuum within EFCC. Work is going on in EFCC. I even hear that there are some politicians, some ministers have been invited, by EFCC and all that. But again, the current president must be very careful not to allow any of these arrests to be based upon politics. That will not in any way, augur well for his own administration. We want issues that is based on real allegation that can be investigated and prosecution, taking place. We don't want a situation where, for political reason, you now make allegations against Bawa or make allegations against Emefiele. No, let it be for good reason that the president has before his table, and then those informations are so heavy that should require further review and investigation. Fine, but if he has to do with politics, I won't want President Bola Tinubu to fall into error of listening to some of his political friends in order to now begin to harm the polity by taking people based upon politics. No, I wouldn't like that to happen. It's only a warning. I'm not saying so. Now, having said that, we are not saying that those people who have been now suspended are already clearly indicted or things have been found culpable against them. Let there be a serious investigation, thorough one done against them. And if they are culpable, then they should be charged to court. Not sweeping it under the carpet or putting them under indefinite detention. I am clearly averse to that.
Thank you very much, Barrister Ubani. Now, we are swiftly moving on. I'm trying to, get as much from my distinguished guests tonight. So, moving on to another issue. This evening, the presidency did announce a number of appointments, special advisors, and one of them was Nuhu Ribadu. Barrister Oshoma, how do you assess Nuhu Ribadu's appointment as Special Advisor on Security, considering his background as a former chairman of the EFCC? How can his expertise in combating economic and financial crimes contribute to addressing Nigeria's current security challenges? Is it a case of a square peg in a round hole, or is it qualified to advise on national security issues?
Yeah, first and foremost, before I go to your question quickly, I would want to say, here, we always say that some of these persons, like those that have been invited now, or that have been arrested and suspended and arrested, that if we were in other society, they'll be answering questions, with the security agencies. So I do not think that the arrests so far, or the invitation so far by Emefiele and Bawa are for political reasons, because the allegations are there. Even when they were in office, there were allegations that were right, and people were just expecting that President Buhari then should do something. But that said, if for you to combat insecurity, you first and foremost need to understand the financial indices and implications of security, because the essence of insecurity is of financial gain. So we have been talking about, tracing, not looking at Boko Haram, but looking out for the sponsors of Boko Haram, looking out for the sponsors of insecurity. What are the benefits for these people? So you can't just be looking at the surface of insecurity. Why not also looking at the financial implication, the economic benefit for people? So for somebody like Nuhu Ribadu, apart from the fact that he's headed an agency like EFCC, and when he headed that agency, he gave it his all. Apart from Nuhu Ribadu, another chairman that had headed that agency, the Nigerians had had one knock or the other for them, against them. So, apart from the fact that he headed the Economic Financial Crime Commission, he's also a trained policeman. So, being a trained policeman, so you're getting two for the price of one. You're a trained policeman to combat insecurity in all ramifications. You've been specially trained, as an investigator in economic crime. So coming now to look at insecurity broadly, we've only been looking at insecurity from the prism of insecurity per se, what is causing insecurity. Meanwhile, you and I, everybody had been saying, don't go after the miscreant, go after the financiers, the people who are financing this insecurity. So I think this is the best time to actually, this is a fantastic appointment as far as I'm concerned, as far as Ribadu, special advisor. Mind you, the buck stop at the president of the table of Mr. President. He's the one to take decision. And the quality of advice that he has
would influence that decision.
Would influence that decision. This is why it is good. These are the people that are closest to the president, not ministers. These are the people that give him day-to-day briefing on what is happening. So I think this is, for me, I give him kudos for appointing somebody like Nuhu Ribadu. He's, somebody that has been tested, and trusted, despite the fact that Nigeria do happen to some of us.
Now, finally, Liborous, we lost connection with Barrister Ubani for a few...
No, I'm still here.
Okay, Barrister Ubani is there. Thank goodness. So I'll let you have the final say. If you can, in less than 2 minutes, I'll really appreciate. You did commend, I remember your opening statement on the speed, and you seem pleasantly surprised by what this administration has done. It's just about 16, 17 days since the president was sworn in. How would you assess the level of his appointments and his responsiveness to issues so far? We haven't even clocked 100 days yet, but from what we've seen, what are your expectations?
I must tell you that I'm pleasantly very surprised with the alacrity with which the current president is handling the affairs of the country. He's reacting in such a positive and swift manner that gives me very good hope that we're in for something great. You know, if he continues in this rate, at this rate where the speed is clearly, you know, high, I think we will never regret the fact that President Tinubu became the president of the country at this point in time in our national life. So I am impressed with the appointments so far, even with Nuhu Ribadu that you asked about. I think we have tried to call military men in that position, and we have not seen much improvement. Let's try somebody from that with that background and see whether he can make a difference. And he may, because while he was EFCC chair, I think he was the best. To me, he remained the best, you know, in the country. He was the best before so the people behind this and drove him out of the system and all that. So far, President Bola Tinubu has really impressed me. If he continues with this speed, being aware of his environment, reacting to issues, and then making sure that he adheres to rule of law, respect of human rights, and good governance, then kudos to him. And
thank you very much, Barrister Monday Ubani. We had a guest here yesterday, Chike Udiap. He did say that what he's achieved in 16 days is more than what the former administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari achieved in 8 years. I just thought I should drop that there. Thank you very much, Barrister Monday Ubani, Chairman, Nigerian Bar Association Section on Public Interest and Development Law, and also Barrister Liborous Oshoma. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both, and thanks for your contribution to the program.